to be just as compelling, just as amazing. To start us off, I would like to have Marcy Neiswander come up and introduce our first speaker.
Good morning. I'm Marcy Neiswander. I teach photojournalism in the School of Visual Communication. We've got a great start to the second day. We've got Justin Sullivan, who is an award-winning staff photographer with Getty Images based in San Francisco. Since joining Getty 16 years ago, he has documented a wide range of stories throughout the United States and around the world. He has embedded on 4 presidential campaigns, and probably the next one? Hope not? Okay. Covered overseas conflict, including tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, covered disasters such as Hurricane Katrina. As a California-based photojournalist, much of his work the past decade has been focused on California's severe drought and its real-life impacts, most notably wildfires. He has covered numerous wildfires, including the recent Camp Fire, which became the state's deadliest and most destructive. Through his work, he has 3 times been named San Francisco Bay Area Press Photographer of the Year. Justin's photographs have appeared in magazines and newspapers around the world and on his Instagram, where you'll also find more lighthearted posts about dogs in windows. So resist looking right now till after he gets done speaking. Please welcome Justin Sullivan.
Does it change the? Okay. How's everyone doing? So, as Marcy said, I've been covering wildfires for close to 20 years now, and in the past 5 to 6 years, they've evolved into something that I never expected to see. The Camp Fire. Make sure I'm working here. There we go. The Camp Fire this past year came at a very unusual time. It came at the very beginning of November. I don't know if you think of Thanksgiving time as the time that you would see wildfires, but they're popping up year-round now. It used to be that you could see a wildfire between like June and September, October, and now it literally is a full-time event every year. There was 8,500 wildfires in California last year. They ranged in size from a handful of acres to the biggest one, which was 450,000 acres, and everything in between. They are definitely moving much faster than they have in the past. They're bigger, and they're a hell of a lot scarier to cover. So today I want to talk about the Camp Fire. I want to talk about the first 3 days, what I saw, how I got there, who I was working with, and the effects that it had on that community. So day 1, I, just to give you a backstory, was out of town for the 7 days prior to the Camp Fire. I was in Texas covering a midterm election. I got back on Wednesday afternoon. I live in San Francisco Bay Area. My girlfriend lives in Sacramento, which is about an hour and a half north of San Francisco. So I went up there to spend the night with her. When she got off work around midnight, I was all of a sudden deeply watching this shooting that was happening in Southern California, thinking this might be something that I got to go cover, so I want to be as informed as possible on it. We stayed up till like 3 in the morning, watching Twitter, watching the news, trying to figure out what was going on. Decided to go to bed. When I woke up, back up, just the backstory on the fire. The fire started at 6:30 in the morning. It's unusual for wildfires to start in the morning. They usually start in the afternoon when the winds kick up, but this, for some reason, the winds had carried over from the night before, and at 6:30 in the morning, a Pacific Gas and Electric worker had reported seeing a fire start near a power line. By 8 a.m., an hour and a half later, that fire traveled 10 miles as the crows flies to Paradise, California, which is unheard of. That's 5,000 acres in less than 3 hours. I mean, that's explosive, that's crazy. These people had no idea. They're getting ready to go to school, for work, they're on the roads, and all of a sudden they're consumed by fire. There was no warning, it would just disappeared, which, they had no idea. The fire later that afternoon burned at a rate of 1 football field a second. It burned 10,000 acres in 90 minutes. By the end of the first day, it had burned 20,000 acres. When I started covering wildfires in early 2000s, you were lucky if a wildfire even got to 20,000 acres. Obviously, they were big ones, but to have that much rate of spread that fast was pretty much unheard of. People can argue the reasons why these are happening. We had 7 years of severe drought, which contributes to the landscape that, obviously if it's dry, it burns pretty fast. But you add winds, you add, excessive heat, it all makes sense. But like I said, this wasn't the summer. This wasn't excessive heat. Temperatures in the morning were around 30 degrees. So go figure, I don't know what the answer is. California is now officially out of drought. The entire state is drought-free for the first time in almost a decade. Does that mean we're going to be out of the woods here? Probably not, because now, with all the rain we've had in the past few months, all that brush that burned away in the past year, it's going to come back. It's going to come back big, and in a few months, it's going to be dry, and we're going to be back in the same boat. So this area that morning was under what they call a red flag warning. Red flags are issued by the National Weather Service, and it's basically a warning that there are going to be conditions that are ripe where a wildfire would really thrive. Low humidity in the single digits, high winds. This particular day, the winds were 50 to 60 miles an hour. That's what pushed it so fast. So this is how I found out about the fire. I woke up at 9. Like I told you, I stayed up until 3 in the morning. This is from my colleague, Noah Berger. If you have seen fire coverage in the past 5, 6 years, you've seen his pictures. He's a phenomenal photographer. He freelances for the Associated Press. We cover fires together, and we have been covering fires together for the past 7 years. We do it because these are so dangerous and so unpredictable that I feel more comfortable being there with somebody else, and does he. Now, if you were here yesterday for Matt's presentation, he was talking about how competitive it is that he has to keep a box of Kind bars at his desk so he can never leave in the case the competition gets the upper hand and gets a 30-second jump on the story. We share all the information, everything, every day. And I wouldn't normally do this with competitors, but I feel it's, to have 100% trust in someone, you have to be able to share everything that you know about something with them in order for them to feel comfortable to share the information with you. Because if I'm out there in a very dangerous situation and someone is just in it for themselves, my life's now in jeopardy, and I don't want to be in that position. How do I know about these fires? How do you find out about a wildfire? They happen in some remote areas sometimes. I follow them on CAL FIRE on Twitter. They're usually very good about posting current fire starts pretty soon after they happen. And I also follow this guy, this CA fire scanner. This guy lives in New Zealand. He listens to the fire scanner in New Zealand, and he actually shares information faster than CAL FIRE. And he shares a lot of information throughout the day, talking about the vehicles being stuff. He was tweeting in real time what he was hearing on a scanner about what was happening in Paradise. It was super helpful. This was the first thing I saw when I got close to Paradise. From the time I got up at 9:30 in the morning, got my stuff together, got in my car, started driving, coordinated with Noah and a handful of other photographers that were coming up. We all started a text chain. We all shared everyone's location so we knew where everyone was, and just started talking to each other, listening to the scanners, listening to any bit of information we could get to try and figure out how to get to this fire, how to get into the fire, and what was our plan of attack. So usually, like I said, fires are in remote areas. We hear about them. It could take hours to get there. I was, for whatever reason, decided to stay in Sacramento that night, which was only 80 miles from this fire. If I had stayed at home, it would have taken me hours to get there. It took me an hour and 35 minutes to get there, which was great. So this traffic you see here, these are people trying to escape to Chico. Chico is about 12 miles from Paradise. So right here, we're 12 miles from where the fire is right now. the sky was dark, dark black. You can see the white specks in there. That's all ash. And there were hot embers in there. This fire was throwing embers miles ahead of itself. That's why it moved so fast. So we got here at 11:45, but prior to this, I'd reached a checkpoint with the California Highway Patrol, and they weren't going to let us in because they were using the main road to get to Paradise as one-way traffic to get people evacuated. Well, that happened, 5 hours earlier. The cop didn't realize that that was not the case anymore, but didn't let us go through anyways. And you're probably thinking, well, why should he let you in? Well, California has a state law that allows credentialed members of the press to go into a natural disaster area with unfettered access. You don't have to have someone drive you in. You don't have to be with anyone. You can just go in. So we're starting to realize there has to be a better way to get in here because we're not going to wait in this traffic. Like I said, Chico's still 10 miles, 12 miles down the road. It's going to take us hours just to get there. So we started to brainstorm and figure okay, well, let's go back where we came, try that cop one more time, and if it doesn't work, we'll just start going through some back roads. And this is what we did. We finally got to the fire. 45 minutes later, this is the very edge of the fire. This road here is Pence Road. It drives right into the eastern side of Paradise. So now we're faced with this problem. It's this looks really, really scary. So should we drive through there? Should we not drive through there? We talked to these guys. They said, well, we haven't gone through there. We sat there for maybe 20 minutes. We never saw a car come out of there. And then we kept hearing on our scanner that there's a hospital 3 miles down the road. The hospital's now on fire, and they have dozens of people they're trying to evacuate, but they can't get any cars over there to evacuate them. So we're thinking, okay, well, if they can't get cars over there to evacuate them, this road must be really screwed. Let's just walk in and see what it looks like. So we walked in, and the first thing we saw was that daytime had turned to night. This is 1 in the afternoon. It's pitch black. It's like a moonless night. And everywhere you look, embers are flying, things are on fire. This house miraculously did not burn down. Everywhere, houses. And if you notice, there's no one there. There was nobody there. We didn't see a single person. We didn't see a single car. We just saw stuff on fire. And we're still hearing this thing about the hospital, and we're walking around. These are people's lives. It's gone. Seconds. Huge homes, all up and down this road. So we're starting to get text again. How are you getting down Highway 70? We can't get in. Noah's car almost burned down because we parked on the side of this road and the fire came around, an area that we didn't see, we didn't look and see that, might come this way, and it did, got pretty close. We always leave our cars running with keys in it. So Josh, who saw Noah's car, could move it, keep it safe. So that's what I say, we always have each other's backs, whether it's your car, whether it's you, hey, don't walk under that power line, it might fall, If you're standing there, don't take pictures on, underneath the power line because they can go at any time. So we decided, let's just try and give it a shot. Let's try and drive down this road and see how far we can get, We have to go further into this thing. We can't just stay here all day. We can't just have pictures of burning houses with nobody around. So we drove down the road. Here's the hazard that I was talking about. These down power lines. If this power pole gets burned in any way, there's so much stress on it now because this thing is down, it's going to pull down. When's it going to pull down? Who knows? You could be driving underneath it and it could go down. You could take trees down with it. So this is the benefit of driving with somebody. Noah can drive. I can be looking everywhere, every which way, up at the trees, looking for hazards on the ground. We had a friend of ours covering a fire 2 years ago when they were trying to get out of an area that was actually posing a threat. He hit a rock, got a flat tire. They sat there for a few minutes and, considered, do we just leave his car here? Just let it burn because, we can't just sit here. And, AAA is not going to come, so. Finally got to the hospital. You see it's on fire in the background. Dozens of these people being evacuated. They were throwing them in pickup trucks, police cars, vans, anything they could get their hands on to get them out of there. You know, these are not healthy people. They're old. And this is sort of indicative of the town of Paradise. The average age in Paradise is probably 75 years old. Most of the people that died in this fire were in their 70s, 80s, even 90s. You know, they didn't have a chance. I mean, even an able-bodied person would have a hard time getting out of this fire. It moves so fast. So, you know, people with just basically the clothes on their back, you know, nothing left. It was troubling for a lot of people. This is a nurse that had just, you know, evacuated dozens of her patients. This is a helipad next to the hospital. As you can see in the background, all the homes that had burned, all the trees that had burned. They set up an emergency room and hospital on this helipad where they treated these people while they waited to be evacuated. The work that these hospital workers did was incredible. It's unparalleled. They performed in this fashion and so professional. Like when we got there, no one was freaking out. It was very orderly, and they got it done. So now we're faced with filing. We have to file our pictures. There's no cell service. How do you file a picture when there's no cell service? We had to drive back 6 miles to try and find a cell signal so we could file our pictures. So after we filed, we decided, let's go, let's try and get into town. Let's try and get in the heart of town and see. We drove by miles of devastation like this, stuff that's just smoldering. Whoops. Evacuation routes where people were trying to leave, cars everywhere, flipped over, crashed into each other, crashed down embankments, crashed into trees. People died in these cars. They couldn't get out, you know. The conditions, as you saw on that first slide when we walked in, it's nighttime. There's smoke everywhere. They can't see anything. So if you crashed your car into a tree, not even knowing what you crashed into and you got out, maybe someone's gonna run you over, you know. I mean, I can't imagine how scary this must have been for these people to just be overwhelmed like that and have no idea where you are, how to get out, and who's gonna come save you. There's no one there. The resources were so spent, like there's no one there to save you. They were saving each other. So we're just driving through town and like everything's on fire. Everywhere you look, everything is on fire. Whole neighborhood, the whole block, gone. Smoldering, just everywhere you look, smoldering. That was 16 seconds. That's thousands of rounds of ammunition going off. We stayed there for 10 minutes, never stopped. I don't know what these people were hoping was going to happen in their neighborhood, but I don't know why you need that much ammunition. But the weird things that you see when you're covering fires, you know, you just drive around and stumble upon just random, bizarre things. Finally got downtown. So it's not just homes, it's businesses. We would drive by, you know, fast food restaurants, gas stations, liquor stores, it's all on fire. You know, the hazards I'm talking about with this pole, see how it's snapped up top? It's a matter of time before that falls. You don't want to be anywhere near that. We drove by a few hours later, it was on the ground. You know, it just takes one other pole to fall down, pull that with it, and then if you're anywhere near it, you're in trouble. Yeah, a little bit of lighthearted in a very bad situation. This is the Black Bear Diner. So it started to get dark around 5:30, and the winds had been a little bit calmer in the mid part of the day, but once it started to get dark, the winds picked up again. And you can tell now where all the fire is because it's dark and everything's glowing, and it's like a rainstorm of embers. Everywhere you look, embers are flying around. This was a Kentucky Fried Chicken that we drove by an hour and a half earlier, thinking, oh, at least something got saved. Sure enough, an hour later. This is what it looks like, a composite of a bunch of pictures I just spliced together to give you a sense of how it felt to be around all these embers. Resulting picture that came from that. It was scary, It's not very often that you are in an environment where stuff is just falling out of the sky and you're watching fires start. Like you're just standing there, you'll see something land on a lawn, and all of a sudden, there's a 3-foot ring of fire right next to you within seconds. It just happens so fast. This is what it looks like to take that picture. People always look at that and go, that looks a little dangerous, but if you've ever been to a campfire, not this campfire, but like a campfire and there's embers, it's not that dangerous, but if you wanted to, I wanted something different. I wanted something to show how this fire was being moved, and it was being moved by the wind, 100%. So we kept going through town, and this was the bright spot of our day so far. This antique mall, this fire crew decided they wanted to save it. Every building left to the right of this antique mall was on fire. They decided to take a stand and save this building. It's still there today. They worked for hours to save that building. And there wasn't a lot of structure protection going on because, first and foremost, they were worried about life. They didn't try and put people's houses out when they were on fire early in the morning. All the resources were spent on trying to save people's lives. And honestly, there was really no way they could save these places. If they walked away at the wrong time, this place would have gone up too. But like I said, they spent hours keeping the buildings next to it nice and, cool off the heat so it didn't extend to the building. "13 hours after this fire started, it is still raging. And like I said, everywhere you look in town, there was something on fire. So typically when I cover a fire, the best pictures come at night. Not because the fire is raging, but they will intentionally set fires to try and cut off the fire. Fire looks pretty. It's very compelling to look at. You can make interesting pictures. But this night, this was one of the first times I've ever covered a fire where I drove by a place that was on fire, a shopping mall, and just thought because everything was on fire. It's like, it wasn't unique. I've covered fires where you drive around for hours, 4 or 5 hours, looking for anything, looking for a person, looking for something on fire, anything, and you don't see anything. And it was just everywhere. And it was to the point where it was like almost overwhelming. It's like, well, what do we do? I mean, what do we do? Like, you can't just have a picture of every single building on fire. So, I mean, we kind of cut it off early. This was the last thing that we saw leaving Paradise. 14 hours after this fire started, they're still evacuating people. These are busloads of people being evacuated. I don't know where they came from, but like literally there must have been 50, 60 people in these buses. So after this, we decided the fire was moving west, and we wanted to try and figure out what it was doing. So we left Paradise and started going down towards Chico to see if we could head it off. And we drove around for probably 3 or 4 hours and never saw anything that was worthwhile, and we didn't see anything that was actually threatened, so we decided to call it a night. So as you can imagine, a town of 27,000 people is now evacuated to a not much bigger town 12 miles down the road. There's no hotels. There's nowhere to stay. So we all slept in our cars. is what we usually do. I keep stuff in my car, food, your basic food, power bars, water, stuff like that, because, who knows how long you can be cut off from reality in these things.
Here will be able to catch this. Can you give me the branch or the division I'm on for the Shadowgrove Apartments that I can reach them?
9:40 in the morning. Looks like midnight. The air quality was so bad, unbelievably bad. Of course, I didn't have any sort of protection, so just had to kind of suck it up. And it was eerie. It was orange. This isn't an Instagram filter. This is what it looked like. This is back in Paradise. The parking, the used car lot that we had photographed, you can see in the background there. Mostly gone. A few of the cars survived. But it was just weird. It was very surreal, sort of moonscape-ish. Orange. Smelled horrible. We all smelled like smoke. Cars smelled like smoke. I mean, you're just breathing this air. They say, on a bad day in Beijing that the parts per million is about 350. They were guesstimating this was upwards of 600 parts per million in Paradise. 8 days after this fire started, the smoke was this bad in San Francisco. San Francisco is 170 miles away. It was so bad that they cut classes at schools, reduced public transportation. People didn't go to work. It was, for 2 days straight, the worst air quality in the world in downtown San Francisco. So we found some fire crews that were working to put out some hot spots because they had anticipated winds again in the afternoon, which, if your house was smoldering, could potentially blow and cause someone else's house that didn't burn down to burn down. So they wanted to get as many of those places knocked down as possible to prevent that from happening. But for the most part, fire in the town of Paradise itself was largely had moved through. There wasn't really much of a threat other than these small smoldering places. And the weird things you see, like I said, part of covering a fire isn't just going straight to the fire, it's driving around and trying to find things. It's driving down roads and looking at destruction to see if there's anything unique about this destruction, And we stumbled across this guy whose actual name was Robert Law, believe it or not. He found his horse on the side of the road and radioed for someone to come get it, and he'd been out there for probably like 45 minutes to an hour just waiting for someone to grab this horse. He said he never had any interactions with horses. He seems pretty comfortable to me. And we talked to him for a little bit and then moved on. So we decided to once again try and find where the fire was going. There's a town 5 miles sort of northwest of Paradise called Magalia, and we found the fire. This was a small community that was fully involved, probably 4 or 5 houses, and this particular firefighter was trying to save a house that hadn't burned yet. It was so hot where this guy was standing that you could only stand there for maybe 5 or 10 seconds. And if you weren't wearing gloves, you weren't wearing full protective gear, you were going to get burned. You were going to get exposure burns. So I'll show you here. He would spray down this house for as long as he could, and he'd have to retreat. You just couldn't stand there for that long. So I don't know if he ended up saving that house, but they were really making an effort to do so. Air quality is still bad. It's 2 in the afternoon. You couldn't see. It was just kind of like, and it wasn't everywhere. Like you saw where the horse was. I mean, air quality wasn't perfect, but it wasn't like this. It just depended on where you went. And again, you find this stuff by driving around. You have to just drive and drive and drive. Put hundreds of miles in a car a day to find stuff like this. Someone found this donkey, probably wandering down this road, captured it, tied it to a pole, put a bucket of food next to it, and hopefully someone will come get it. We ran into this CAL firefighter. This was one of the last things we did that day. He said that these cats had fallen off the back of a pickup truck, someone trying to evacuate. They didn't realize that they had fallen off, and they just kept driving. He asked us, since he couldn't leave his area, because he was part of an operation here, if we could take it to an animal shelter. So we drove down to Oroville, which is south of Paradise, and dropped them off at the animal shelter. Because first and foremost, we're humans. We're here to tell a story, but we're also here to help if we need to. And why wouldn't we do that? You know, why not? I mean, it just seemed like the right thing to do. So we hung out with those cats for a few hours. So day 3 was a shift in operations. Like I said, on that second day, the fire had pretty much left Paradise. It wasn't probably going to circle back and do any more damage. So they began the process of trying to figure out how to find some of these missing people. There were hundreds of people missing. And at one point, I think there were thousands. You know, in these fires, in the rush to get out, people don't bring their cell phones, or they don't bring their cell phone charger. They have the clothes on their back. So when they want to try and figure out where these people are, they don't know how to get in touch with them. They're in a shelter somewhere. There's no way to get a hold of your loved ones. So as far as you're concerned, they're missing. So then they have to go through this whole process of trying to figure out who's actually missing and who's not. And they have to go through stuff like this to find these people. So I want to talk a little bit about how we share information. I told you earlier, the group that I travel with, photographers from AP, AFP, Reuters, The Chronicle in San Francisco, we all share everything. We share everything. And I was with Noah this day. Our friend Josh was with another photographer named Gabrielle who works for The Chronicle, and they stumbled across this mortuary crew. These are sheriff deputies from Butte and Yolo County, and it was their job to go investigate homes to try and find people that were missing. I've been covering disasters for over 2 decades now, and I have never, ever been allowed to photograph anything like this. It is unheard of. I've been threatened with arrest, physical violence when you try and approach these situations. They don't want you to see anything. And that's different in other countries. You know, you can go to a hotel fire in Bangladesh or something like that. No one's going to stop you. But in the United States, it just doesn't ever happen. Josh called us and said, hey, we ran into this crew. You guys should get over here. That's unheard of. When has a competing wire service ever called you to tell you that something's happening that you should come and photograph? But that just goes to show how much we trust each other and how much we need each other to trust each other in order to feel safe in these situations. But like I said earlier, if you're in it for yourself, you're putting my life in danger, and I don't want to be part of that. You know, this is far too important to, have an ego. Through that, these are some of the best friends in my life. We hang out all the time. We talk almost every day, even when there's not a fire. So this was at a trailer park that had burned to the ground. They found 2 bodies here. Josh had the unfortunate experience for the first time in his life to see a dead person. And it really shook him to the core. When we got there, he was shaking. And he didn't really know how to process it. And there also became a question of well, what do I do with these pictures? He's a photographer, he's a photojournalist. He took pictures of everything he saw there and would sort it out later. Kind of like what you heard yesterday with the Cincinnati Enquirer. Shoot everything, we'll sort it out later. And he asked us, do I file these pictures? The picture that he showed us was of a charred body laying on the ground. Unrecognizable, it looked like, charcoal, basically. It was horrific. And we talked about it for a good hour. What do we do with this picture? Do you send this? And it was nothing out of jealousy. It was nothing of you're going to beat us with this. it was like, do people need to see this? Does this move the story in any way? Does this tell a different story? Or would it be better to just follow these guys for the day, see what they find, and maybe you can find a more compelling picture, a more compelling angle to this that is not so much in your face and gratuitous. So for whatever reason, and I, to this day, do not know why, and I wish someone would tell me, I would like to know this, why they let us follow them. You know, we asked, can we follow you to your next one? They said, sure. We respected their space. We shot with long lenses. And we let them do their thing, and they let us do our thing. And that day they found, while we followed them, they found the remains of 5 people on the first day. So like I said, the team was comprised of sheriff deputies and a local funeral home worker. And this guy, Ken, who drove that hearse, I believe they were based in Oroville, which is a town, like I said, south of Paradise. For the next couple of weeks, that guy just went around with these crews and picked up the remains of people. And as you can imagine, a lot of times they didn't find bodies. This is them collecting bone fragments from a home, putting it into a paint bucket. That's someone's life. Sheriff deputies that were working on these crews lived in Paradise, lived in surrounding areas, hadn't been home since the fire started 3 days earlier, working 24-hour shifts. It was taking its toll, you know. It was taking its toll on us. I can't imagine what it was doing to them, you know. And they're now having to go look for their friends and neighbors in burned out homes, finding nothing but ash. It was a tough assignment for these guys, and that to me speaks volumes that they even let us tag along with them, you know. There's a lot, I mean, we've all encountered angry police in our careers. Do you think they're going to be nice? Why would they be nice to us? And they really were. One of these sheriff deputies told us, he's like, you know, police and media right now have a bad rap. You know, they're not looked at very kindly in the public eye. And there was one guy that he was doing what we were doing. He was documenting his brothers and sisters working to try and, you know, recover people in their community, because he says he thought it was important, and he appreciated what we were doing, and he thanked us for being there so people would know what was happening with this story. And that was just like so incredible to me, that here we are standing on someone's burned out home where they've just discovered the remains of somebody, and we're having this conversation about how important it is what we both do and how so often it's underappreciated. So this is the last one that we followed them on that day, and I think that they had wrapped it up as well, where they actually found an actual body. It wasn't just a bucket full of bone fragment. They found a body. And this was one of those things where, you know, when we got there, they said, hey, why don't you guys just stand here, because they found this body kind of down this little hill and by a house. And we totally respected that. It's like, sure. So now it was me, Josh, and Noah, and we're trying to figure out, okay, we all want something different out of this. We all want to make a nice picture. So, you know, where are you going to stand? Where are you going to stand? I don't want to be in your way, you know. And we all did our own thing. We didn't stand next to each other. We just kind of found our own spot. You in my shot, you in my shot. No, we're all good. And we just waited. And waited for them to bring this body up. And that was the end of the 3 days. You know, they would mark the spot. This is where we found somebody. This was the spot where I believe where Josh saw that body. So at the end of the day, after our long conversation, we had the conversation again. You know, Josh was still like, you know, what do I do with these pictures? You know, and we all argued against moving them because we didn't think that it was worth it. We didn't think it was worth it because I personally felt that it would be a betrayal to these police officers to let us follow them. They trusted us to do the right thing, and I think by moving those pictures, we wouldn't have done the right thing. The pictures that we were able to get are far more compelling than just a picture of a dead person on the ground, because that's literally what it was. It was just a dead person on the ground. There was no context. It was just like, here's a dead person. This, to me, shows a lot more emotion. You get the idea. This is, doesn't have to be in your face necessarily to get and understand the full story. But those are conversations that you have to have, And, like I said, what if we had been with someone that was just out to get whatever they were getting for themselves? They didn't really care. They were happy to get the information from us, but it's like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And that's the beauty of the relationship that I have with these people, is it's always a consensus. We want to do the right thing across the board. And we want to help each other grow. We want to inspire each other. And honestly, I feel like being part of a group like that has been one of the most inspiring things in my career. I'm learning to become a better photographer 20 years into my career because these guys are helping me become that. And I think we help each other. But like I said, it's not going to be a situation that you're going to run into very often in your career because it's competitive. Just like Matt said yesterday. Matt, all of a sudden, is not going to be hanging out with the guys at the New York Times sharing information about the Mueller report. It's just not going to happen. But in a situation like these, conflict areas, something like that, you need that support. And I am forever grateful that I have them, and forever grateful that my coverage, their coverage, and the public sees a better product in the end. End of the day. Camp Fire burned 153,000 acres, burned 18,000 structures, 14,000 of those were homes. 85 people lost their lives. This was one neighborhood, and this was widespread. If you go to Google Maps now and search Paradise, California, you can see the destruction. They've changed their map to reflect what is Paradise today. So, if you're curious to see what it looks like, it's definitely worth a look. California, 2018, deadliest wildfire season on record. Almost 2 million acres burned, over 8,500 fires, 104 deaths, 6 of those were firefighters. Some of those firefighters were killed by trees, what I talked about earlier. You just don't know, and you have to be super careful where you go. This is the gear that I wear. This is in my car always, because you don't know when these things are going to pop up. Like I said, it used to be June through September. Now it's all year round. The largest fire prior to the Camp Fire was in December of the year prior. The most destructive fire prior to the Camp Fire, which burned, you saw 18,000 structures, was 1 year earlier. It burned 5,000 structures. That is a threefold jump in destruction. So I'll start at the top. Obviously, you'll wear a helmet. Embers, branches, all kinds of stuff can ruin your day easily. You saw that it gets dark. Headlamp is a must. A lot of the stuff we do is at night. So if you're walking down a path or have to hike in a mile to where some firefighters are, you want to be able to see where you're going. Goggles are important. Like I said, you saw the embers flying around. Those get in your eye. Your day is over. Fire shelter. A fire shelter is kind of like, people call it the baked potato. It's a sort of a foil type device. If you're in a situation where you get surrounded, there's no way out, you jump in that thing. 50-50 chance that you're going to survive it. Better than zero. No mix pants and jackets. This is what all wildland firefighters wear. It's a fire-resistant suit. It's lightweight. Still, like in the summertime, when you're out there doing these fires, it's 100 degrees. It gets hot. But after a while, you just don't even know it's on. You're just happy it's there. The gloves, which I should be wearing, don't tell OSHA or anyone like that, in my pockets. Like I said, if I want to get close to that structure there or anything that's burning with extreme heat, like the house I showed you earlier, you're not going to be able to hold your camera up for very long. And if you hold it up for long enough, you're going to get burns on your hands. The wildland boots, they go above my ankles. You don't want to go walk into a house that is just burned. That floor is still several hundred degrees. If you have tennis shoes on, your feet are going to be on fire within seconds. That's it.
May I?
Yeah.
As someone who's teaching a journalism and trauma course this semester, let's all just breathe out very deeply. This was an extremely powerful presentation. Justin, how you doing, man? Okay? All right.
We don't have a lot of time for questions. I'm going to start with the first one. The working with the other photographers reminds me of stories I hear about combat photographers.
Exactly.
And I don't know if you've had that conversation with combat photographers, but I think it's pretty similar.
It is very similar. I've worked in conflict zones, and when you're not embedded, you want to be with other people. I mean, share information because it's your life. You want people there that are going to have your back. Like I said, if you're with someone that's all about them, they don't necessarily have your best interests in mind. They're going to do whatever they can do to get what they want, and hopefully beat you in the process. But that's not what this is about. This is about providing the best coverage to the public. We want to get as close as possible because, if I just decided, well, I'm going to stay on the freeway here where these cars are, and I'm going to take a picture of the smoke column, how is that informative to anyone? What do you know about what happened inside there? So much happened inside there. So much devastation to that town, to the people of that town. We would get phone calls and emails from people all the time. If you post on social media, it's like, hey, I live on this street. This is my address. Can you see if my house is there? Part of our day, every day, was driving by people's houses to see if they were there. In this case, 90% of the time, it wasn't good news. But it's peace of mind for these people to know. Because they have no idea. They left it, they were ushered out of there, 8 in the morning, no advance warning. They have nothing. They have nothing. They have nothing. And they don't even know if their house survived because they can't get in there to look. So we provide that to the community as well. That's our job, is to provide information. And you can't do that from a freeway 12 miles away.
Were there any planes dropping water anywhere? Because I didn't see helicopters or planes or anything.
We went out one day and looked. There was. It wasn't in Paradise, and it wasn't in that area. The fire had moved around this south, like on the third or fourth day, going towards Oroville. And there's apps. We use apps to figure out where air traffic is. And if you look at some of these flight apps, you can just see circles over areas. And okay, that's where they're doing the airdrops. I didn't see a single plane the entire time I was there.
Do these trees survive at all? Once they burn, do they ever come back?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, they get burned pretty bad.
Yeah.
But every now and again, you'll see a green one, in the midst of a whole row of black ones.
Are they starting to rebuild the town now?
They've had a lot of rain. They had some snow. So the efforts were sort of thwarted for a few weeks. And from what I understand, they just started clearing properties again. I don't think anyone, well, actually, that's not true. Someone told me that they thought they had saw something on TV about at least one house being built. But most of those lots, I would say 80% of those lots, haven't even been touched yet. They haven't been cleared. It's all toxic.
Are you going to do a follow-up story on how the people are going to rebuild?
I've gone up 3 times since then. I finished my coverage on Thanksgiving, and then I was out of town and doing other assignments for the rest of the year, and I've gone up since the beginning of the year a couple more times.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
Thank you.
I have a question here.
Yeah, so how do you keep yourself sane and in the right kind of frame of mind after having to cover all this destruction and loss of property and life?
That's why I told you that story about Josh. That shook him to the core. He had never seen anything like that. And, we all kept in touch with him. repeatedly in the days after that. Just checking in, man, how are you doing? You know, it's tough to look at this stuff. It's tough to look at someone's house burned down. You know, but that's another benefit of being with the group is we keep it light. You know, in the midst of these horrible situations, you gotta just like, you have to tell jokes. You gotta just like be buddies with people to kind of overlook it. Do you know anyone who's a paramedic or a cop? I mean, I was an EMT for years in the 90s, and you see some pretty crazy shit. And you have to sort of, you know, it's not wise, but you got to just sort of sink it inside every now and again and just try and take a lighter approach to it, because it will screw you up. Everyone seems to be okay with this. I did an interview probably a week after the fire started, and the woman said to me, she goes, you know, you don't look good. And a lot of it was just being tired. You know, we were working a lot, sleeping in our cars, so you know, you don't get much sleep. So the combination of the two things, being overwhelmed with so much, you know, destruction and devastation, as well as being tired, it does catch up to you. But you have to keep it in check, and you have to have people that are going to be there to support you. If I went and covered this fire by myself and saw all the stuff that I did and had no one to tell or share that experience with and, you know, relate to, yeah, I'd be pretty screwed up. No question.
What was the difference between coming home from the other fires you've covered in your past and coming home from this one?
This one definitely had an impact because, like I said, this is the first time we've ever been allowed to, or at least this is the first time I've ever been allowed to see the removal of remains of people. And that was heavy. So, you know, thankfully I have people I can talk to about that. Thankfully I'm with my significant other is a journalist. They understand, and I can tell them about it, and they'll understand, and they'll be supportive. I can talk to Noah, Josh, those guys, and they understand because they were there. And, you know, it comes up every now and again. You know, we'll go out to dinner. How you feeling about that, you know? And I hadn't really thought about it until I started putting this slideshow together, you know, to be honest. So I was revisiting that and going, yeah, that was a dark time.
We are at the end of the time, but I think when we see something like this, we know the next time we see a wildfire, we'll have a much better idea of the people who are trying to tell us that story. So thank you, Justin.
Thanks.